So in this video, I'm going to talk you through a lesson plan for teaching your students to cite sources, particularly in MLA format, but obviously you can adjust this activity for APA or Chicago style, Oxford style, Harvard style, whatever it is that you teach. Now, I want to make it somewhat clear that this is not a lesson plan for learning MLA citations not in the sense of like, here's a lecture talking through citations and things like this. This is about activities that help students practice MLA citations and then figure out very practically where to find this information on library databases, because sometimes it's a bit tricky to find it. So this is a two-part lesson plan, basically. The first part involves an activity where they create citations. And I have 3 citations that I have them use of types of sources that I think they're likely to use in their research. But you can do more citations, you can do less citations, depending on how much time you have. For a 50-minute class period, I find that 3 citations works pretty well. If you've got a 75-minute class period or something longer than that, you might want to add more. But basically, I'll put up on the screen here an image of the handout that I use. But basically, I give my students broken down versions of 3 different citation styles. So one, I use an article from our local newspaper. Another, I use an academic journal article found through the library databases. And the other I use is just a website. And what I do is I give them all of the information that they need labeled, but not in the correct order. So the author's name, the title of with the database, the author's name, the title of the journal article, the title of the journal itself, volume and issue number, date, etc., etc. But I also give them additional information that they don't need and that shouldn't be included in the citation. So, like with the database article, I include the university that the author works at, and I include the database publisher. So in this case, it's Elsevier, but something like EBSCOhost or something like that. These are things that obviously don't get included in a correct MLA citation for an article found through a library database. So I put in bits and pieces of information that shouldn't be included in the citation to try and force students to think carefully about what gets included. I also put these on my sheet, not in the correct order, because ultimately I want students to create a correct MLA Works Cited page. And so I don't put them in alphabetical order. So that's one of the tricks. And then, so I give students some time in class, 12 to 15 minutes or so for these 3 citations. I also remind them, here are the pages in the textbook that we're working out of that include the Works Cited bibliographic entries. And actually, I help my students out some. You can choose to do this or not do this, but I help my students out some by labeling what the types of sources are in the textbook itself. So, for instance, I'm teaching this semester out of New Harbrace Guide, the 3rd edition. And so the way that this particular book, this particular MLA Works Cited section describes a database article is an article from a library subscription service. I don't know how you can see that. So on my list with the deconstructed citation entries, I'll label that one an article from a library subscription service. And that makes their lives a little bit easier because they can go and practice using this directory, using this MLA guide to figure out what that citation should look like. So in addition to practicing the citation itself, they get to practice using a citation guide, which is itself a very useful skill that will stand them in good stead. So anyway, I give them 12 to 15 minutes to create their works cited lists. And then I ask students who thinks they've got a correct citation for this first entry. And I pick one student who raises their hand, you're in charge of this one. Who thinks they've got a good citation for this second entry? You're in charge. Who thinks they get a third one? Who thinks they've got a correct citation for the third entry? You're in charge. Now I have the 3 students who volunteered come up to the board and create a works cited list from these 3 entries. Hopefully they put them in the correct alphabetical order, but they don't always. And hopefully the citations are generally correct. But after the 3 citations have gone up, I ask the rest of the class, is there anything on the board that we want to change or correct? And then I'll make corrections. Hopefully we move then to correct entries. Ultimately, hopefully we get correct entries. But if not, and actually even if they do, I will still show them this. I also have a correct answer key. So I have a correct works cited page that I can pull up to show them what these entries should actually look like. So then we talk about that. We talk about what each of these entries involves. Then I go to some of the library databases. Now I like JSTOR, Academic Search Complete, and CQ Researcher, but I'm more on the borderline with CQ Researcher now because they've kind of changed things. They didn't used to have the volume and issue number listed on, if you look at CQ Researcher articles just on the website, they didn't used to have the volume and issue number, but now they do seem to, which is a step in the right direction on CQ Researcher's part. But it slightly undercuts the argument that I make, which is that you should always download the sources as PDFs. Although actually, I'll come back to CQ Researcher. So I start with JSTOR. And the goal of this second portion of the activity is to help students figure out where on a database citation information is available. So I get a student to give us a topic, one topic that they're researching, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And then put in a keyword, we pull up some articles. Really just one article is all you really need. And I pull it up just on the website and we look at the information there. We look for the author's name. We look for the title of the article. We look for the journal name. We look for the volume and issue number, page range, stable URL, DOI, whatever it is. And we find all of those things on the website, on JSTOR's display of that article. Then I tell them the other option you have, the better option, in my opinion, is to download this as a PDF. So I click the PDF button because JSTOR and usually Project Muse and a lot of other databases, what they will give you is a cover sheet. And so I want students to be aware that that cover sheet exists because the cover sheet, and I show them this on whatever article it is that we've downloaded. The cover sheet collects up all the information that they need to do a correct citation. So that's a tremendous resource for them. So I show them that. Then we talk about Academic Search Complete because it has a different functionality. But again, we go in with Academic Search Complete and I put in whatever keyword it is that we had searched. We pull up an article and then Academic Search Complete starts you out basically at the information page. So it has the title, it has the author, it has the journals, etc., or authors in many cases. It has the journal, all of that stuff, including hopefully a DOI or a stable URL or something like that. But then Academic Search Complete may or may not give you a cover sheet. So that's another thing worth knowing. And if you don't get that cover sheet, it's worth writing down the citation information, or even putting it directly into a draft of the works cited page for future reference. So that's the thing I show them there, is that just that different functionality in terms of how the information for citations is presented. And then I take them to CQ Researcher because, again, for first year writing courses, CQ Researcher is a reasonably good resource. It's not super great when you get to higher level research, but it's useful for providing general overviews or general information about subjects. The trick with it is even though the volume and issue number is now apparently available on the online version of CQ Researcher articles, you do still want to download the PDF because the PDF has page numbers. Whereas if you read the information online on the CQ Researcher website, they don't include page numbers. So when you're citing in text, and this is what I emphasize to my students, when you're citing in text, you do need to cite to a page number, and you need the PDF to do that. So again, this is the, and I mean, if there are other databases that you want your students to use, if there are other databases that you prefer, take your students through those databases and show them in those databases specifically where this information is available. Again, this is about helping students start to recognize the functionality of the databases, how they work, where you find information, and what kinds of information you need to properly cite things.